All right, today we're going to take a look at the growing tensions between the North and the South for chapter 15. Let's get this Prezi stuff out of the way here. So, chapter 15 deals with our nation breaking apart, kind of all the things that lead into us getting into the Civil War. So, in chapter 15, we'll take a look and you should be able to understand the conflicts that pulled the North and the South apart and the attempts to resolve the issues dividing the country. And make no mistake about it right now, the main issue that everyone is dealing with is the issue of slavery. So today we're going to see how slavery kind of creates a divide between the North and the South. By the end of our section today, you'll be able to explain how the abolitionist movement heightened tension between the North and the South. You'll be able to describe the controversies over slavery in the territories. You'll be able to evaluate how the Wilmot Proviso and potential statehood for California made these regional divisions even deeper. And then we'll also analyze the Compromise of 1850. To start with one European story. This one is a very memorable one. I can probably repeat it word for word without an issue. This one's just, I like this one, but it's actually one European's story today. And it says Alexis de Tocqueville was a young French government official from a wealthy family. In 1831, he sailed across the Atlantic Ocean to study American prisons and politics. At one point, Tocqueville traveled in a steamship down the Ohio River. The river was the border between Ohio, a free state, and Kentucky, a slave state. Tocqueville noted what he saw on both sides of the river, and here's what he says. The state of Ohio is separated from Kentucky just by one river. On either side of it, the soil is equally fertile and the situation equally favorable, and yet everything is different. Here on the Ohio side, a population devoured by feverish activity, trying every means to make its fortune. There, on the Kentucky side, are people who make others work for them and show little compassion, a people without energy, mettle, or the spirit of enterprise. These differences cannot be attributed to any other cause but slavery. It degrades the black population and enervates or saps the energy of the white. And that's from his book, Journey to America. So in section 1 today, we're going to take a look at the differences between the North and the South, and we'll also examine how these differences cause political tensions that threaten to tear the nation apart. So, here we go. Now, as we talked about way back in chapter 11, the economies of the North and the South developed quite differently in the early 1800s. Although both economies were mostly agricultural, the North began to develop more industry and commerce. By contrast, the Southern economy relied on plantation farming. The growth of industry in the North helped lead to the rapid growth of northern cities. Much of this population growth came from immigration. In addition, immigrants and Easterners moved west and built farms in the new states formed from the Northwest Territory, such as Wisconsin. Most canals and railroads ran east and west, helping the eastern and midwestern states develop strong ties with each other. Now this map right here is from 1870, and this is a railroad map, and you can see between Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, through Illinois and Indiana and Ohio, all the way out to the East Coast, you can see just the sheer numbers of railroads throughout the Midwest connecting the Northeast. And that's not to say we don't have railroads in the Southeast down by Florida, Alabama, Georgia, because we do. But as you can see, especially the Transcontinental Railroad, which goes out to California, all of those railroads, for the most part, they meet up with Northeast or Midwestern, Northeastern railroads. That's definitely where most of our travel went. Now, the South developed quite differently than the North. A few wealthy planters controlled Southern society. They made really big profits from the labor of their slaves. Most of this profit came from trade. Planters relied on exports, especially cotton. Because these plantations were so profitable, planters invested in slaves instead of industry, and as a result, the South developed very little industry. Most Southern whites were poor farmers who owned no slaves, and many of these people resented the powerful slaveholders. But poor whites accepted slavery because it kept them off the bottom of society. So here you can see here are black slaves working in cotton fields in the South, and this is an actual primary source picture. This is a real thing. This isn't something that was posed for or made up. This is a true picture. So they're dressed in long sleeves, in very hot conditions, and they're wearing hats, essentially to shade themselves. Now, the issue of slavery caused tension between the North and the South. In the North, the anti-slavery movement had slowly been gaining strength since the 1830s. Abolitionists believed that slavery was unjust and should be abolished immediately. Many Northerners who opposed slavery took a less extreme position. Some Northern workers and immigrants opposed slavery because it was an economic threat to them. Because slaves did not work for pay, free workers feared that managers would employ slaves rather than them. Some workers were even afraid that the expansion of slavery might force workers into slavery to find jobs. Despite their opposition to slavery, though, most Northerners, even abolitionists, were racist by today's standards. Many whites refused to go to school with, work with, or live near African Americans, and in most states, even free African Americans couldn't vote. When Northern attacks on slavery increased, slaveholders defended slavery and most offered the openly racist argument that white people were just better and superior to blacks. Many also claimed that slavery helped states by introducing them to Christianity, as well as providing them with food, clothing, and shelter throughout their lives. Slaveholders were determined to defend slavery and their way of life. In this way, the different ideas about slavery brought the North and the South into conflict. After the Missouri Compromise in 1820, political disagreements over slavery seemed to go away, but new disagreements arose with the outbreak of the war with Mexico in 1846. Many Northerners believed that Southerners wanted to take territory from Mexico in order to extend slavery. To prevent that, Representative David Wilmot of Pennsylvania proposed a bill known as the Wilmot Proviso to outlaw slavery in any territory the United States might acquire from the war with Mexico. But slaveholders believed that Congress had no right to prevent them from bringing slaves into any of the territories. They viewed slaves as property. The Constitution, they claimed, gave equal protection to the property rights of all U.S. citizens. The Wilmot Proviso removed the right of slaveholders to take their slaves, which they regarded as property, anywhere in the United States or its territories. So Southerners claimed that the bill was unconstitutional. The Wilmot Proviso divided Congress along regional lines. The bill did pass the House of Representatives, but Southerners prevented it from passing in the Senate. And up here, top left corner, you can see the bottom half of David Wilmot's face. My fault there, I forgot to put him in to make the slides go from one to another over his face. But the Wilmot Proviso, like I said, divided Congress, and it didn't pass completely, but even though it never became law, it did have some important effects. It did lead to the creation of the Free Soil Party, which was a political party dedicated solely to stopping the expansion of slavery. Their slogan in the party expressed their ideals of free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men. The Free Soil Party won more than 10 seats in Congress in the election of 1848. More important, the party made slavery a key issue in national politics, and politicians no longer could ignore slavery. By 1848, the nation's leaders had begun to debate how to deal with slavery in the lands gained from the war with Mexico. The proposed addition of new states threatened the balance in Congress between North and South. The discovery of gold in California brought thousands of people into that territory, and there would soon be enough people in California for it to apply for statehood. Most California residents wanted their state to be a free state, but obviously this tips the balance of power that we talked about with the Missouri Compromise, with Missouri and Maine. This would put the balance of power clearly in favor of the North. Southerners actually wanted to divide California in half, making the northern half a free state and the southern half a slave state. So in 1849, President Zachary Taylor proposed that California submit a plan for statehood that year without going through the territorial stage. He thought by skipping that stage, this plan gave Southern slaveholders little time to move to California with their slaves. In March of 1850, California applied to be admitted as a free state, and with California as a free state, slave states would become a minority in the Senate just as they were in the House. Jefferson Davis, a senator from Mississippi, warned, "For the first time, we are about permanently to destroy the balance of power between the sections." So this would be very awkward. This is a proposal actually from a couple of years ago that divides California in half. So the white would be like North California, and the red would be South California. And the reason I just put this on here is because I want you to be able to visually see just what it would look like if our most populous state in the nation were divided in two. Just really funny. Now, California could not gain statehood without the approval of Congress, though, and Congress was definitely divided over the issue. Behind the scenes, statesmen sought compromise. So taking the lead of this was Senator Henry Clay of Kentucky, which, if we remember back, Clay helped create the Missouri Compromise in 1820, and now Clay crafted a plan that would settle this problem in California. His plan called for, in order to please the North, California would be admitted as a free state and the slave trade would be abolished in Washington, D.C. Now, to make the South happy and please them, Congress would not pass laws regarding slavery for the rest of the territories won from Mexico, and Congress would pass a stronger law to help slaveholders recapture runaway slaves. So many people on both sides felt like they had to give up way too much in this plan, but there were a lot more that were tired of the regional bickering between the North and the South. They wanted to hold the Union together, so Daniel Webster, a senator from Massachusetts, supported the compromise for the sake of the Union. He actually said, and I quote, "I wish to speak today not as a Massachusetts man, nor as a Northern man, but as an American. I speak today for the preservation of the Union. Hear me for my cause." So the job of winning passage of the plan fell to Senator Stephen A. Douglas of Illinois. By the end of September, Douglas succeeded, and the plan now known as the Compromise of 1850 became law. Some people did celebrate the compromise, believing that it helped save the Union. But the compromise would not bring peace, and in section 15.2, we'll talk about how sectional tensions continued to rise.